Hi everyone, so let's continue. We're going to be talking about the effect of thyroid hormone on specific body functions. So we already spoke about a few of them. Let's recap them. Carbohydrate metabolism being one of them. So thyroid hormone, it basically stimulates all aspects of carbohydrate metabolism. So basically it increases the glucose uptake, so cells end up taking more and more glucose into themselves. There's increased glycolysis, which means glucose is being broken down. So there is increased glycolysis, glucose is being broken down. But there's also increased gluconeogenesis, which means glucose is being formed. So the body is just going crazy overall because it's doing everything all at once. And then moving forward to the fat metabolism, again, it increases all aspects of the fat metabolism as well. The lipids they mobilize rapidly from the fat tissue, from the adipose tissue. The lipids are mobilized, which means the tags they converted to free fatty acid, and these free fatty acids they roam around freely in the blood plasma. And then these free fatty acid, obviously the beta oxidation also happens and you get ketone bodies. But what is more important is for you to understand that lipids are mobilized in excessive thyroid hormone production or even in increased thyroid hormone production, and there are more free fatty acids in the blood. When you talk about cholesterol and phospholipids, so their percentage decreases. Cholesterol and phospholipids and even tags they decrease in concentration because tags are converted to free fatty acids. You may be wondering, why does cholesterol decrease? Because the gut motility increases, and a lot of this cholesterol it's lost in bile. So basically, cholesterol is secreted. There's increased cholesterol secretion in the bile, and it's lost in feces. So that's the very reason why cholesterol concentration decreases. There's increased requirement for vitamins because vitamins they are essential part of, because we know that there are increased production of proteins. Okay, proteins metabolism. It's not mentioned here. So let's look at this proteins. What happens is that thyroid hormones they increase protein synthesis, they also increase protein degradation. So every aspect of even protein metabolism increases. Proteins are being formed, they're being catabolized, so their anabolism catabolism both increases remarkably. So what would be the net effect is balanced protein turnover. This is essential for normal growth and development. Excessive thyroid hormone, for example, in those people who have hyperthyroidism, I told you that both of these procedures increase, right? But in hyperthyroidism, degradation is more compared to the synthesis. So there's more protein breakdown. Proteolysis is more in the muscle, and that's the reason the muscle mass decreases and there is muscle weakness. There's a negative nitrogen balance, and there could be a potential weight loss. So if they ask why is there weight loss in hyperthyroidism, that is because of the muscle breakdown. But I've already mentioned this previously that there are high chances for this being counterbalanced by good appetite because the people who have more thyroid hormone they have a better appetite, so they end up consuming more food. This means that obviously they're eating more, they're going to gain the weight, so that will be counterbalanced by this weight loss, which is caused by the muscle breakdown. In those of the people who have hypothyroidism, which is deficiency of thyroid hormone, there will be decreased protein synthesis, there will be decreased protein degradation. So both of these aspects are decreased. But in hypothyroidism, the degradation is increased significantly compared to the protein synthesis. In hypothyroidism, both of these are decreased relatively, and there's decreased growth, there's a stunted growth in children, there's accumulation of mucopolysaccharides in tissues, which results in myxedema, there's positive nitrogen balance. And if they ask about the mechanism, so increased RNA transcription, increased enzyme synthesis, increased mitochondrial activity. So in general, thyroid does one of the very important things that it increases a lot of mitochondria. There increased mitochondria, there will be increased ATP production. That ATP production is utilized in production of protein, and also this increased energy means there'll be increased heat. Excess catabolism predominates. So this is about protein metabolism. So we've covered the carbohydrate, fat, and the protein metabolism. What about vitamins? So there'll be increased requirement for vitamins. Because I've mentioned, sorry, because I've mentioned that there is um, increased enzymes and there are increased coenzymes. This means there are a lot of enzymes and coenzymes that need vitamins as the substrate, right? So a lot of them need not vitamin as the substrate, but they need vitamin as the essential part in order to activate them, right? So for that very reason, you also need increased vitamins, especially if the thyroid hormone is increased. So a relative deficiency can occur when excess thyroid hormone is secreted, unless at the same time increased quantities of vitamins are made available. Then thyroid hormone, it does a very important thing. It increases the basal metabolic rate. So increased extreme amounts of hormones are required to cause high basal metabolic rate. For this, I refer to this diagram that there should be excessive, there should be a very extreme amount of increase in the thyroid hormone, then only there'll be an increase in the basal metabolic rate. So you can see the thyroid hormone increase up to 100 mg per day. This is the normal secretion, and the basal metabolic rate was 100. Sorry, the change in the basal metabolic rate was zero. So until this, everything is normal. So above this, for example, uh, the thyroid hormone secretion increased double, 100%. So it increased up to 200. And the basal metabolic rate, it just increased up to 10, or let's say 11. So there wasn't a very significant increase in basal metabolic rate. So that's the reason they're saying that extreme amounts of hormones are required to cause high basal metabolic rates. So in order to have a very high basal metabolic rate, extreme amounts of increment in the um, thyroid hormone secretion is suggested. So thyroid hormones, they increase the BMR by around 60 to 100%. So 60 to 100% basal metabolic rate is increased. Now, decreased body weight. So I've told you the body weight decreases. This is because of the muscle because of the muscle breakdown, right? The proteolysis that is happening in the muscles, the body weight decreases. But this effect doesn't always occur because it is counterbalanced by the increase in appetite. So there's increase in appetite because of thyroid hormones. The person ends up eating more food, so it's counterbalanced. Now, increased blood flow and cardiac output. Okay, so you're starting the things that we did not discuss previously. What happens is that the blood flow increases and also the cardiac output increases. So because there's increased metabolism after the thyroid hormones, there'll be rapid utilization of oxygen because the metabolism increases. So whatever oxygen is going into the tissues, that is insufficient. Tissues need a lot more oxygen than the regular amount that they utilize. So there'll be increased of utilization of oxygen. There'll be increased production of carbon dioxide and all the other metabolic waste products. So this means that there should be vasodilation so that more blood can be accommodated. There should be increased blood flow so that it can ensure that the right appropriate amounts of oxygen is reaching the tissues and all of the metabolic waste products they are removed from the body. So increased blood flow is essential. Also, you must have noticed in people who are patients of hyperthyroidism, they'll have hot flashes, the skins will be red. That's because there's excessive blood flow towards the skin, importantly, in order to remove the heat, because there's a lot of heat in the body. So that heat is normally removed from the capillaries which are closer to the skin surface. And then also the cardiac output increases because obviously, sorry, if the blood flow is high, the cardiac output will also be high. Then the heart rate is also increased. The heart rate increase is basically as a direct effect of the excitability of heart rate. So heart rate increases because the excitability and the contractility of the heart, it increases. What does this mean? This means the thyroid hormone, it has a direct effect on the heart muscles, and it increases excitability and contractility of the heart muscles, because of which heart rate increases. And heart rate is very, very vital because it's one of the few sensitive physical signs that the doctor, whenever the patient visits the clinic, the doctor first and foremost measures their heart rate. So the clinician uses this very important physical sign in order to determine whether the patient has excessive or diminished thyroid hormone. So the heart rate is increased, then and there the doctor will understand that this patient has a increased thyroid hormone. Now, when you talk about another very important thing, which is arterial pressure. So arterial pressure is there's no effect. It's normal. You may be wondering, why is arterial pressure normal? So for that, let me go back here. This is some explanation also, but that you won't understand. So normal arterial pressure is because, I'll tell you what is the formula for arterial pressure. Its formula is cardiac output into total peripheral resistance. So we by now know that the cardiac output increases, right? There's increased blood flow, there's increased heart rate, and there's increased cardiac output. These are three factors we already discussed. What about total peripheral resistance? Total peripheral resistance decreases because of the vasodilation, right? Because vasodilation is happening, so the peripheral resistance will decrease. So these two things, they are going to counterbalance each other. Therefore, there won't be as such effect on the arterial pressure. So arterial pressure is going to be normal even after the administration of thyroid hormone. And because of the increased blood flow through the tissues between heartbeats, the pulse pressure is often increased. So why is the pulse pressure increased? If you talk about the pulse pressure, that is increased. And pulse pressure is basically the difference between systolic and diastolic. So what happens is that once a person has once the doctor has administered thyroid hormone in a patient, the systolic blood pressure is elevated at least 10 to 15 millimeter mercury, and diastolic pressure is reduced. So obviously, when you are subtracting a bigger amount, let's say 100, from a smaller amount, let's say 10, so the answer will be greater, right? Because you have increased this number and decreased this, so your pulse pressure will increase. So because of increased blood flow to the tissues between heartbeats, and there's increased blood flow to the tissues between heartbeats because of thyroid hormone, pulse pressure is often increased. And why is pulse pressure increased? Because systolic pressure is elevated in hyperthyroidism, because there's increased contractility, there's increased stroke volume, there's increased speed of ventricular ejection. So there's more forceful ejection. This raises the systolic blood pressure. Systolic blood pressure is the a forceful ejection, right? It's the pressure with which the blood is ejected from the heart. And diastolic pressure is reduced because of the peripheral vasodilation, because blood runs off into the tissues faster during diastole. So there's decreased total peripheral resistance. Because of these three factors, the diastolic pressure reduces. So there's a lower diastolic pressure. Because of which, your pulse pressure is going to increase. Also, another thing. So this is done. This factor is done. Moving on to the next factor, which is about the heart strength. The heart strength increases. A slight excess of thyroid hormone can increase the strength of the heart. Why is it so? This also occurs in mild fevers, and during exercise, the heart strength also increases. However, whenever thyroid hormone is increased markedly, heart muscle strength becomes increased or weakened heart muscles whenever. Okay, so if there's a slight increase in sorry if there's a slight increase in thyroid hormone, the heart strength increases. But if there's hyperthyroidism, which is excessive increase in the thyroid hormone, what happens is that the heart strength is worsened, it's weakened, the heart strength is decreased. Sorry, what is this? Heart strength is weakened. And this is because of long-term excessive protein catabolism, because there's excessive protein catabolism. So the severely thyrotoxic patients will die of cardiac decompensation secondary to myocardial infarction, myocardial failure, and increased cardiac workload imposed by the increase in the cardiac output. So the thyrotoxic patients they die because of cardiac decompensation. The respiration is increased, and there's no need to explain anymore that why respiration increases. I can still recap if you want. That is because of increased oxygen utilization and increased carbon dioxide and other metabolic waste production. So because of that, not only the rate of respiration increases, but also the depth of the respiration increases. Then, what are the excitatory effects? What are the effects in central nervous system? Thyroid hormone, it has excitatory effects on the central nervous system. It increases the rapidity of the cerebration. This means, what is cerebration? It's the thinking and the working of the brain. So that is increased, because of which a patient of hyperthyroidism, he'll be extremely nervous because his brain is working so fast. He'll have psychoneurotic neurotic tendencies. He'll have psychoneurotic tendencies, which means he'll have anxiety complexes, he'll have extreme worry, paranoia. So because of this, all is because of the excitatory effects on the central nervous system. And also, if you talk about the GIT motility, so GIT motility is increased, and also there's increased appetite, there'll be increased food intake, because of which it's almost imperative for the GIT to secrete more and more of digestive juices. So digestive juices secretion will also increase, the motility will also increase. So the These are the two things that you need to remember under GIT, that the digestive juice secretion increase motility increases. And why do these two things increase? Because of increased appetite. Because there's more appetite, so the person will be consuming more food. So these two things need to be improved. So a person who is a patient of hyperthyroidism, it's almost imperative that he will experience diarrhea because there's increase of gut motility and digestive secretions. So there'll be diarrhea, and a patient of hypothyroidism will experience constipation. What's the effect on function of muscles? If there's a slight increase in thyroid hormone, usually the muscles react with vigor. But with excessive thyroid hormone, muscles are weakened. Why are they weakened? Because of excessive protein catabolism, the muscles get weakened and they also become sluggish, they become slow because they relax and they contract very slowly. Okay. And then when you talk about another thing, which is muscle tremor. So patients of hyperthyroidism, they're often characterized by a fine muscle tremor, and this muscle tremor is different to that of the Parkinson's disease or that of when a person shivers. So those are 10 to 15. Parkinson's tremors are 10 to 15 times per second, but these muscle tremors are fine and they're different. So a patient is sorry, a patient is asked to extend their arms, and then the sheet of paper is placed in the hand, and that's when the degree of vibration is observed. So increased reactivity of the neuronal synapses in the areas of the spinal cord that control the muscle tone. Because of that, the tremor is there, and this is a very important feature when you're assessing the degree of thyroid hormone effect on the central nervous system. Then the other thing that we're discussing right now is the effect on sleep. Very important because thyroid hormone is increases thyroid hormone. It increases the basal metabolic rate. It increases the activity of the person. So the person is unable to sleep. So there'll be insomnia. The person won't be able to sleep and there'll be constant tiredness. But in those patients who are, you know, suffering by hypothyroidism, they'll have somnolence, as in they'll be able to sleep for 12 to 14 hours or even more.